It was Thanksgiving Day, and the whole house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey. Laughter echoed from the dining room. Plates clattered. The kind of sound that used to make me feel warm, needed. I stood in the kitchen, holding a small bowl of mashed potatoes. No one had called for me to come sit. I waited a moment longer, then stepped forward on my own. There were 8 chairs around the big table, all full, except for one in the corner, not even at the table. A small card table had been set up near the wall, beside the recycling bin. A single plate, a plastic cup, and paper napkins. That was my spot. I tried to keep my face calm as I sat down. My knees ached from standing. No one looked up when I pulled the chair in. Not Rachel, my daughter-in-law, who was too busy pouring wine. Not my son, Brian, who was showing something on his phone to the kids. Not even the little ones noticed. Or maybe they had just learned not to say anything. Until Max. My youngest grandson, 6 years old and too honest to lie, looked over at me from across the room and said, "Grandma, why aren't you sitting with us?" The room fell silent for a second. Rachel's smile tightened. Brian cleared his throat. "Oh, honey," she said quickly. "Grandma likes it quiet, remember?" I smiled. Forced. Mechanical. "Yes, sweetheart. I just like some peace and quiet while I eat." Max blinked, confused. "But it's Thanksgiving." I wanted to cry right then. Not because I was sad, but because I was tired of pretending. Tired of acting like this was normal. Tired of making excuses for people who had stopped seeing me as part of the family. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I unfolded my napkin, placed it on my lap, and quietly began to eat. No one refilled my drink. No one passed the cranberry sauce. But I chewed slowly and told myself the same lie I had been telling for months. At least I'm still in the house. I wasn't always the woman in the corner. There was a time when this house smelled like my cooking, when the walls held pictures I had picked, when the couch had the little floral pillows I'd sewn by hand, the ones Rachel quietly donated without asking. This used to be my home. We bought it in 1986. My husband, Charles, and I. We were just two working class folks trying to raise a decent boy in a decent town. It had a wraparound porch and a yard big enough for a swing set. I still remember painting the mailbox red and white like a candy cane that first Christmas. Rachel was just a name in Brian's stories back then. The girl who sits 2 rows behind me in chemistry. She was sweet at first, smart, polite, a little shy. When they married, I welcomed her with open arms. I gave her my mother's pearl earrings and told her she was family now. I meant every word. Then life happened. Charles passed suddenly, heart attack in the garden, holding a bag of mulch. I lost my compass that day. Everything that had felt stable turned into fog. Brian said, "Come stay with us, Mom. Just for a while. We'll figure it out." I didn't want to burden them, but grief is heavy, and silence is heavier. So I packed a small suitcase, gave the keys to the neighbor who bought the house, and moved in with my son, my daughter-in-law, and their 2 little ones. At first it was beautiful. We had coffee together in the mornings. Rachel let me read bedtime stories to the kids. Brian would bring home fresh flowers, just because. I kept telling myself I was lucky. I still believed I belonged. But then weeks turned into months, then months into years. Little things shifted. My old recipes were too heavy. My stories became too long. My hugs, too clingy. I started hearing doors shut quietly when I entered the room. They didn't ask me to leave. They just stopped making room for me. And now? Now I sit at a plastic table near the trash, pretending not to notice how far I've drifted from their lives. Sometimes I wonder if they even remember this was once my home. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel thing about being erased. It's not loud, it's quiet. Software, almost polite. At first, it was just little changes. The dinner table got more crowded. Rachel's sister started coming by more often, then her mom. I'd go to set the table, and Rachel would say, "Oh, we've got it, Linda." At first, I thought she was being kind, thought she wanted me to rest, but then they stopped setting a place for me at all. The family photo wall slowly changed. New pictures, updated frames, bright smiling faces at the zoo, on vacation, at birthdays. I wasn't in any of them. When I asked Brian about it, he said, "We'll take one with you soon, Mom. Promise that was 18 months ago." I began to notice Rachel's voice shift when she spoke to me, the way someone talks to an elderly neighbor they don't fully trust with the stove. She'd repeat things twice, speak slower, over-enunciate. "Do you understand what I'm saying, Linda?" she'd ask, as if I hadn't been a school secretary for 20 years and handled finances better than both of them put together. I'd nod, smile, pretend. Because that's what women like me were raised to do, to keep the peace, to be grateful. But peace has a price. The bedtime stories stopped too. I'd sit with the book in hand while the kids were upstairs, only to hear Rachel reading to them instead. "They need to learn to separate," she told Brian once when she thought I couldn't hear. "She's getting too attached." I didn't know there was such a thing as too much love for your grandkids. One night I offered to take Max to his piano lesson. Rachel smiled that tight smile again. "Oh, Linda, you get confused with directions, remember?" "I don't. I never have." But I nodded anyway. And just like that, 1,000 tiny cuts made one deep wound. No arguments, no screaming, just slow, polite rejection, dressed up as concern, and me, too afraid of being a burden, letting it happen. Some mornings I'd wake up and wonder what would happen if I simply didn't fold the laundry, didn't sweep the floors, didn't unload the dishwasher before Rachel got home from yoga. Would they even notice? Would they think the house was haunted, or worse? Would they blame me for getting lazy with age? Because that's who I'd become in this house. Not a guest, not a parent, not a partner in anything. Just the silent helper in the corner, the unpaid maid with wrinkled hands and a smile they mistook for consent. It started gradually, like everything else. Rachel would leave the kids' laundry basket outside my door in the mornings. No note, no words, just a gesture, as if to say, "You've got time, we've got expectations." So I'd fold their tiny shirts, match up their socks, spray out the food stains from Brian's work shirts. I'd even press Rachel's yoga pants with lavender water, because no one ever told me not to care. Then it moved on to floors. "Don't bother, Linda," Rachel said once. But the Swiffer was always left by the door, like a dare. So I swept, mopped, vacuumed the upstairs where I wasn't even allowed to walk barefoot. Then the dishes. The dishwasher beeped once too many times after dinner and no one moved, so I did. Quietly, every night. Plates clinking in the sink while they watched shows in the living room. And meals. If I didn't make myself something, I didn't eat. Some nights I'd survive on toast or canned soup while they had takeout on the couch. I once asked if they wanted help ordering, and Rachel responded, "Oh, we didn't think you liked Thai." I do like Thai, but I said, "That's okay," and went back to my room. The worst part? The kids began to imitate them without even knowing. Max once handed me his empty juice cup and said, "You forgot to fill it, Grandma." I laughed, but inside, I cracked. I used to be the one who built this home's rhythm. Now I was just background noise, quiet, convenient, and entirely replaceable. It happened on a Thursday. Rachel was on the phone, standing in the hallway just outside my room. She didn't know I was awake, or maybe she didn't care. Her voice was low, but I heard every word through the thin plaster wall. "She's sweet, but she forgets things, like a lot. I think we might need to start considering options." Considering options? I didn't even know what that meant. Assisted living? A nursing home? Or maybe just boxing up my things and sending me somewhere I could rest, like an old cat on a quiet farm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was hollow. I had spent my whole life remembering everyone else's details: Brian's peanut allergy, Rachel's lactose intolerance, Max's bedtime songs, Emily's favorite storybook. I remembered their dentist appointments, their school plays, their anniversaries. And yet, a single misplaced hairbrush or a forgotten grocery item, and suddenly I was the forgetful one. Truth is, I still remembered everything that mattered. I remembered the day Rachel first came to dinner, chewing on her lip nervously and asking for seconds of my pot roast. I remembered Brian's tears when he lost his first job. I remembered holding Emily for the first time, how she fit in my arms like a warm sigh, and I remembered how much quieter the house had become when my voice stopped being welcome in it. But now my memory was being used against me, a weapon, a justification, a polite excuse to disappear me. I looked at myself in the mirror that night, held my own gaze, said aloud, "You are not broken." My voice shook, but I meant it. The next morning, Rachel asked if I remembered to take my vitamin. I smiled. "Yes, and I remember your wedding date, the name of your high school best friend, and the exact color you wore the night you first met Brian." She blinked, then walked away. I folded my hands in my lap, heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with something fiercer, a quiet refusal to vanish. It was Emily's 7th birthday. The kitchen was filled with balloons and pink frosting. Laughter spilled from every corner, and Rachel had even invited the neighbors. Everyone had a party hat, everyone had a plate, everyone had a place, even me, sort of. My chair was by the pantry this time, away from the table, but still in the room. I told myself that counted. The kids were running around with goodie bags and glitter glue, giggling like wind chimes. Rachel handed out slices of cake, and Brian was snapping photos like he was capturing something sacred. I smiled, of course. I always do. Then Max came up and handed me a card, a big one, the kind that folds open like a book with crayon hearts all over it. "It's from all of us," he said proudly. "Look, we all wrote our names." I opened it. "Happy birthday, Emily. We love you. Mommy, Daddy, Max, Grandma Joe, Aunt Carrie, Uncle Ted." I kept reading. My name wasn't there, not even scribbled in a corner, not even Love Linda, nothing, just blank space where I was supposed to exist. I looked up at Rachel. She was laughing with her sister, holding a wine glass, not even glancing in my direction. I pressed my fingers to the card, feeling the indentations of everyone else's names. My chest ached, not like heartbreak exactly, something colder, like the soft thud of being forgotten. Max tugged on my sleeve. "You like it, Grandma?" I smiled. "It's perfect, sweetheart." And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I excused myself and went upstairs, to the room they still let me sleep in. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. Those hands had held every one of them, had wrapped every Christmas gift, had clapped at every school recital, had brushed fevers from their foreheads. But now those hands didn't even belong in a birthday card, and I realized something chilling. You don't have to die to disappear. You just have to stop being remembered. We used to go together, all of us. Sunday mornings were sacred. Brian would wake the kids early, Rachel would iron their little shirts, and I'd make cinnamon rolls from scratch. We'd sit in the third pew from the front, left side, under the stained glass window of the Lamb. That window caught the morning sun in just the right way. It made everything golden. But now I walk alone. They stopped going 2 years ago. It's just too hard with the kids' schedules, Rachel had said. Besides, the pastor talks too long. We stream services online sometimes. I never saw them do it, so I kept going, alone. Every Sunday, I'd button up my best coat, slip into my church shoes, and walk the 7 blocks past oak trees and shuttered windows. Some of the neighbors still waved. A few didn't recognize me anymore. At church, they greeted me like always. Gentle smiles, warm hands, coffee waiting in the back. No one asked why I sat alone now. Maybe they assumed I liked it that way. Maybe I let them. But I always sat in the same spot, third pew, left side, under the Lamb. And every time the light passed through that stained glass, I remembered the way Max used to lean against me during the sermon, how Emily would try to whisper jokes, and Brian would wink from the other end of the bench. Gone, replaced by silence. One morning, Pastor Helen touched my shoulder after service. "You doing okay, Linda?" I nodded. "Just tired today." She smiled gently. "You're allowed to be, but tired doesn't mean you don't matter." That stuck with me. Tired doesn't mean I don't matter. I walked home slowly that day, watching my shadow on the pavement. It was still there, long, quiet, real, even if no one else was walking beside it anymore. It was a Tuesday evening, quiet, like most nights in the house now. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters, though no one asked me to. It was something to do, something that made me feel like I still had a reason to be here. I heard laughter, sharp, sudden, alive, coming from the living room. Emily's giggle, Brian's deeper chuckle, then Rachel's high-pitched laugh, the kind she only used around company. I smiled, expecting to join them. Maybe a movie night. Maybe they'd ask me to sit with them on the couch like we used to do. I walked to the hallway, slippers soft against the wood floor, and gently reached for the living room door. It didn't move. Locked. I paused. We never locked that door. I tried again, turned the knob slowly, hoping it was just stuck, still locked. And then I heard it. The muffled sound of a game show, the rustling of snack bags, Rachel saying, "She's probably asleep by now," and Brian replying, "Let's just enjoy tonight." I froze. I wasn't invited, not forgotten, deliberately excluded. I stood there for a moment longer, listening. The kind of listening where your heart beats too loudly in your ears. I stepped away quietly, as if it were me who had intruded. Back in the kitchen, the light above the sink flickered. I didn't fix it. Instead, I sat at the small breakfast table, the one they stopped using years ago, and stared at the door that separated me from my own family. A door that used to swing open with joy, now shut with intention. I didn't cry, not that night, but I wrote it down. Every word, every locked moment. My journal, now halfway full, was becoming the only place I still had a voice. And in the stillness of that kitchen, I made myself a quiet promise. If they're going to close the door on me, I will open another, even if I had to build it with my own two hands. It was a Friday afternoon when Emily came home from school, her backpack swinging side to side, a folded sheet of paper clutched proudly in her tiny hands. "Grandma, look what I made." Her smile was sunlight, and for a second, it melted every bitter edge inside me. She unfolded the paper and laid it on the kitchen table. Crayons, stick figures, red and yellow hearts. At the top in shaky block letters, "My family." 4 people were drawn standing in front of a house. A man with brown hair. "That's Daddy." A woman with long lashes and pink earrings. "That's Mommy." A little girl in a purple dress. "That's me." A smaller boy with green shoes. "That's Max." That was it. I looked again, looked hard. I wasn't there, no figure with gray hair, no extra smile, no old lady in an apron or with a cane, not even a dog labeled Grandma. Just nothing. I tried not to show the tremor in my hands as I smoothed the drawing flat. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said softly. Emily tilted her head. "You're not mad?" "Of course not. Why would I be?" She hesitated, then said, "Mommy told me you're just visiting." My breath caught. Visiting. This was the house I raised her father in. The walls still held echoes of bedtime stories I told when Brian was her age. I baked her first birthday cake in this kitchen. I mended her blanket when it tore in the wash. Visiting? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "That's what Mommy said," she added, shrugging. "She said you don't live here all the time." I looked at the teacher's note attached to the bottom of the drawing. "Emily drew her immediate family. Please help her practice full names at home." Immediate family. I guess that no longer included me. After Emily skipped away to find her brother, I stood at the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just repeating what she'd been told. And in that moment I realized they weren't just pushing me out physically. They were erasing me, quietly, patiently, like I was a placeholder whose time had expired. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not without a voice, not without a fight. The drawing stayed on the fridge for days. Every time I walked past it, I felt its silence. Each crayon stroke reminded me I no longer existed in the world my family was creating. Not really. I was just visiting. A ghost in the attic. A woman-shaped shadow who folded laundry and set plates, but didn't belong in anyone's memory. One morning, after another quiet breakfast alone, I sat at the table with my coffee going cold. I stared at the phone for a long time. It was just sitting there, lifeless, waiting. I picked it up. For weeks, no, months, I'd considered it. I had rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 different ways, but I always talked myself out of it, told myself I was overreacting, that I was lucky to have a roof, that I didn't want to make things worse. But now, I was done being small. I found the card wedged in my old wallet, beneath expired coupons and church flyers. Her name was still there in neat blue ink. Janice Walker, Family Services Advocate, Lucas County. We had met at church. She worked with older adults who'd been displaced or mistreated by family. We'd spoken once at a bake sale about her work. I remembered how kindly she looked at me when I mentioned I lived with my son and his wife. I dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, this is Janice." "Janice, this is Linda Hollings. I don't know if you remember me." "I remember," she said softly. "Are you safe right now?" I paused. What a strange question, one I hadn't allowed myself to ask. Was I safe? Physically, yes, but emotionally, spiritually, I didn't know. I think so, I said, but I'm disappearing, and I don't know how to stop it. Janice didn't rush me. She didn't fill the silence. She just listened as I talked, really talked, for the first time in a long, long while. I told her about the drawing, about being locked out, about being treated like a guest in my own family's life. I told her about Rachel's concern, the confusion they claimed I had, the moments where I felt like I was being slowly pushed off a cliff with kindness. She didn't call me dramatic. She didn't minimize my pain. When I finished, Janice said, "You're not alone, and you're not wrong. Let's talk about what we can do, together." I didn't cry on the phone. But after I hung up, I sat there in the kitchen with sunlight pooling on the table and whispered to myself, "You are not invisible." For the first time in a long while, I believed it. It happened the day after I spoke with Janice. I was standing by the pantry, looking for a box of oatmeal I knew had been there the day before. I moved cans aside, stood on tiptoes, even got a step stool. It was gone. I mentioned it out loud, not accusing, just casual. "Strange. I could have sworn the oatmeal was right here yesterday." Rachel, sitting at the table scrolling through her phone, didn't even look up. "Grandma's getting confused again," she said to Max, who was coloring nearby. Max didn't react. He was used to these little throwaway remarks, but I stood there frozen, my hand still resting on the shelf. I wasn't confused. I wasn't getting old. I wasn't losing it. I was being chipped away at, one suggestion at a time. They were rewriting me in real time, narrating a version of me that sounded convenient, dazed, forgetful, out of touch. Later that night, I overheard Rachel on the phone. She wandered outside last week just to check the mailbox 3 times, and now she's saying we're moving things on purpose. I mean, I'm worried. Worried. That word again. The word abusers use to make themselves sound heroic. I sat in my room, hands folded, heart pounding, while she painted me as a fragile liability, someone to be monitored, managed, maybe even institutionalized. But I wasn't fragile. I was furious, and more than that, I was finally awake. The next morning, I quietly began gathering things, not to run away, no, to prepare documents, old bills, my journal. I called Janice again and told her about the comments, the suggestion that I was losing track of things. She didn't sound surprised. "They like to make you doubt your mind," she said. "It's easier to erase someone when they start to question their own reality." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I looked in the mirror, into my own eyes, and said, "You know what's true." I repeated it, louder this time. "You know what's true." Because I did. I wasn't confused. I was being gaslit, and I was ready to shine a light on every lie they told in my name. It started with one sentence. Today, I was not invited to dinner. I wrote it down in a small spiral notebook I found in the back of my dresser drawer, the kind school children use, with blue lines and a cheap cardboard cover. The pen shook a little in my hand at first, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of finally giving my thoughts a place to land. Then I added more. They locked the living room door again. Rachel told Max that I'm just visiting. Brian asked if I'd remembered to take my meds. I don't take any. And on the next page, Emily kissed my hand when no one was looking. Max drew me a picture and slipped it under my door. It had a heart that said, "You make the best toast." It wasn't just about pain. I wrote down kindness too. Every small act of love that reminded me I still existed in someone's world, even if it was just a child's. Every night I sat at my little desk and wrote, not because I thought anyone would read it, not because I planned to show it to Rachel or Brian or the world, but because I needed to make a record of my truth before someone else rewrote it for me. Because gaslighting doesn't just make you question what's real, it makes you question if you were ever real to begin with. So I documented it all: the silence at dinner, the changed locks on the hallway closet, the day I overheard Rachel practicing how she'd explain my confusion to a family friend, the afternoon I asked for my mail and was told, "You don't need to worry about things like that anymore." I even recorded the temperature in the house, how they always set the heat low, and when I asked if it could be warmer, they said, "Well, you're the only one who's cold," as if comfort were something to earn. And in the margin of each page, I wrote a small affirmation: "You are not crazy. You are not invisible. You remember. You matter." Each time I turned a page, I felt a little stronger, like laying bricks under my own feet, one word at a time, rebuilding a floor no one could pull out from under me again. This wasn't just a notebook, it was my testimony, my memory in ink. And one day, it would speak louder than their whispers ever could. It was a rainy Tuesday when Janice showed up. She knocked softly, not like someone demanding entry, but like someone offering help. I had called her the week before, asked if we could meet in person. I didn't tell Rachel. I didn't tell Brian. Some things I had learned needed to stay mine a little longer. I opened the door just a crack. She smiled from beneath a soaked umbrella. "Still want to talk?" I nodded and let her in. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. She didn't try to fill the silence. She let me take my time, let me measure every word, every breath, like they were sacred again. And then, finally, I handed her the notebook. "This is everything," I said quietly. I wrote it all down. Janice didn't skim. She read, carefully, respectfully, page after page, the locked doors, the whispered insults, the erasure, the drawing on the fridge, the oatmeal, the confusion I was told I had. She stopped once to dab her eyes. When she reached the pages about Max and Emily's kindness, she smiled through her tears. "They still see you," she whispered. "Children have a way of knowing the truth." I exhaled something I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside, resources, contact numbers, and something I didn't expect, a simple typed form titled Statement of Psychological Abuse, Senior Adult Testimony. I stared at it. "It's not a report to the police," she explained. "Not yet. It's a protective record, something official, something that says, you told your story. Even if no one wants to hear it, it's now real on paper." My hands trembled as I signed it, not out of fear, but out of power. I was no longer just scribbling my truth into the corners of notebooks. I was documenting it, naming them. Before she left, Janice looked me in the eyes. "You are not alone, Linda. You never were. You just needed someone to remind you you're still here." After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, rain tapping the windows, the kids' laughter drifting faintly from upstairs. And I whispered to myself, "You are here, still, and they can't erase that. I don't take many pills, just one in the morning, something mild for blood pressure. Been on it for years, reliable, predictable, like me, I suppose." That morning, I missed it. Not because I forgot, but because I couldn't find it. The little orange bottle was always kept on the second shelf of the cabinet. I checked 3 times. It was gone. I asked Rachel casually if she'd seen it. She blinked and said, "Aren't you supposed to keep track of your own things?" Then she went back to scrolling on her phone, so I let it go, told myself I must have misplaced it. Again, their voices in my head. Maybe you really are getting forgetful. By noon, I had a headache. By evening, my vision blurred slightly. And then, somewhere between the hallway and my room, the world tipped sideways. The floor met me hard and fast. Next thing I remember, the cold brightness of an ER ceiling. My wrist had a plastic band. My throat was dry. I blinked slowly as voices murmured around me. Then I heard his, Brian, my son, talking to the nurse at the foot of the bed. "She's fine," he said with a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "She's still very independent. Probably didn't eat enough today. She insists on doing everything herself, you know." The nurse glanced at me. Her eyes were kind, but she didn't ask me anything, just nodded and walked out. I turned my head toward Brian, weak but clear. "Independent?" I said. He smiled, relieved to hear my voice. "You're awake." "Thank God, Brian," I whispered. "I asked about my medication." No one answered me. He hesitated. "Rachel said you had it handled. She said you didn't want help." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. When the doctor came in, I found the strength to ask for a medication review. He agreed. Later that night, he returned with a clipboard. "Linda, you've been taking the wrong dose for a few days now," he said gently. "You're lucky it wasn't worse." I nodded. Because I wasn't just lucky, I was being watched, monitored, denied. They weren't waiting for me to fall. They were letting me, and still calling it independence. When I was discharged the next day, I clutched that hospital report like it was a shield. Not just a record of my body, but proof. Proof that I wasn't being dramatic. Proof that I had nearly disappeared, right in front of the people who claimed to be watching. It was one of those quiet afternoons where the whole house felt like it was holding its breath. I had just returned from the hospital a few days earlier. The bruises on my wrist were fading, but the weight in my chest, the kind that doesn't show up on scans, was still there. I walked down the hallway, carrying a plate of sliced apples. Emily's door was cracked open. I could hear her humming to herself, talking softly to her dolls. It was the kind of sound that used to make me smile without even thinking. I raised my knuckles gently to knock, a habit I never had before. But these days, I no longer entered rooms with the same certainty. Before I could even tap, Emily's voice cut through the door. "Mommy said not to let you in." I froze. She didn't sound angry, or even firm, just like she was following orders, like she didn't even think to question what she was saying. My hand fell to my side. "It's okay," I said, barely above a whisper. "I just brought you some apples. I'll leave them outside the door." No response. So I placed the plate down gently and turned to walk away. Just as I stepped back, the door shut completely. No slam, no drama, just a quiet, obedient click, like I was on the wrong side of something sacred. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, staring at that closed door. My own granddaughter, the one I'd rocked to sleep, the one I taught to hold a spoon, to say please and thank you. The one who used to slip into my bed during storms saying, "Grandma, I feel safer with you." And now, I wasn't even allowed in her room. I walked back to mine, every step heavier than the last. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote, "She didn't mean it. She's just learning what she's being taught. But if this continues..." she won't remember the truth. I underlined that sentence twice, because more than my own loneliness, more than the meals I ate alone, or the silence that wrapped around me at night, what scared me most was the idea that one day Emily might grow up believing that I wasn't a part of her life, that I hadn't been there, that I didn't love her, and that would be the deepest erasure of all. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of slow, gray Ohio day where nothing seems urgent, except perhaps the quiet unraveling of what's been ignored for too long. Brian was in the garage, fixing something under the hood of his car. I hadn't spoken more than 10 words to him all week. Not because I didn't want to, but because I had stopped trying. But that afternoon, he came inside early, said something was off with the alternator. I was sitting at the table, folding the same towel 3 times just to keep my hands moving. He opened the fridge, then paused. "Where's the roast?" I blinked. "Rachel made pasta last night." He frowned. "No, she told me she made a roast for you. Said she left it out for you to have lunch today." I didn't speak right away, because I remembered exactly what had happened. Rachel had come in late from yoga, warmed up leftovers just for the kids, and when I asked if there was anything for me, she smiled and said, "Oh, I thought you already ate." Brian closed the fridge slowly. Then he turned to me. "You didn't eat dinner with us last night either, did you?" I shook my head. He stared at me, really looked, for the first time in weeks, maybe months. "Why didn't you say something?" I folded the towel again, more out of instinct than need. Because when I do, I'm told I'm confused, or needy, or imagining things. He sat down, hard. "Mom," he said, his voice small. "I didn't know." I looked at him then, tired but steady. "No, Brian, you didn't want to know. That's the difference." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "Because you were always somewhere else, at work, on your phone, watching a screen while your wife slowly erased me from this house." He didn't defend her. He didn't say I was wrong. He just sat there, quiet, crumbling under the realization that he had been complicit, not by action, but by silence. "I saw the plate outside Emily's room," he finally whispered. "She said Mommy told her not to open the door if you came by." I nodded. She's learning how to forget me one day at a time. We sat in that thick silence for what felt like an hour. Then Brian said the most important words I'd heard in a long time. "I want to fix this, but I don't know how." And for the first time, maybe ever, I believed him. I didn't speak, not right away. Brian sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands folded, his face pale. He looked like a man staring into a mirror for the first time and not liking what he saw. I reached beneath the cushion of my chair and pulled out the notebook, the one with the worn edges, the one that had become my witness, my therapist, my shelter. "I want you to read this," I said. He hesitated. "What is it?" "It's what you missed." He took it carefully, as if the weight of it might hurt him. And maybe it did. Because the first few pages, he flipped through them slowly, were like tiny knives dressed up as sentences. He read about the cold dinners, the drawn curtains, the locked mailbox, the door Emily had closed, the nights I sat awake in a house filled with people and felt entirely alone. I didn't know," he whispered again, but this time his voice cracked in a different way. "You didn't want to know," I repeated gently this time. He nodded, eyes scanning the page where I wrote, "Today I was told I'm lucky to live here." Today, I remembered I bought this house in 1988. Brian's mouth tightened. He reached the page about my fall. The missed medication, the ER visit, the nurse who was told I was just independent. His jaw clenched. She could have seriously hurt you, he muttered. Or worse. She didn't have to raise a hand, I said softly. Neglect wears the same face as care when you dress it in false concern. We sat like that for a long time, my words in his hands, his silence wrapped around my truths. Finally, he looked up. Do you want to leave? I blinked. I wanted to stay. I just wanted to matter. He nodded slowly. Then we stay. But something's going to change. I swear it. Not with promises, I said. With action. That night, he didn't sleep in the master bedroom. He slept on the couch, right outside my door, like a man guarding something sacred he almost lost, like a son learning how to be a witness, finally, to the mother who'd never stopped being there. Rachel came home late that Monday. She pushed through the front door with her usual rustle, grocery bags, designer tote, keys jangling like wind chimes no one asked for. Her heels echoed on the hardwood floor. She expected routine, expected the same rhythm, me in the kitchen, quiet and small. Brian distracted, the kids tucked away. She expected the house to bow around her like always. Instead, it was still, too still. She looked up and saw Brian sitting in the living room, arms crossed. I was in the dining chair beside him. The notebook, my notebook, rested on the coffee table. Her eyes flicked to it like it burned. "What's this?" she asked. No hello, no fake smile, just that sharp, irritated edge in her voice that always came out when she wasn't in control. Brian didn't speak, so I did. "It's a record," I said plainly, "of the things you tried to pretend didn't happen." She laughed. Dry. Dismissive. "Oh, please, are we doing this again? She's been writing her little diary for weeks, Brian. She's not well." Brian didn't blink. "She's more well than either of us, Rachel." Her face stiffened. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes, she said, walking toward the stairs. "I don't have time for one of her episodes." Brian stood. "You won't be joining that meeting," he said. Rachel paused. "What?" "I already called your parents," he said, "and Janice, and a social worker. They'll be here tomorrow. I've also filed a formal wellness review with Adult Protective Services." Rachel stared, blinking. "You did what?" "We're not brushing this under the rug anymore." She opened her mouth to speak, but for once, nothing came out. No lie ready, no spin prepared, just silence. She stared at me, and for the first time I didn't look away. I didn't shrink. "I raised a son in this house," I said calmly. "Then I raised his children. I was part of every memory you take for granted, and I will not be written out." She stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door. The house shook, but I didn't. I sat back, folded my hands, and felt stillness, not the heavy kind that comes with loneliness, the powerful kind, the kind that follows truth, spoken out loud. Finally, it started small. That night, Emily knocked on my door, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with a quiet kind of knowing. She held her favorite stuffed bear in one hand and her drawing pad in the other. "Grandma," she whispered, "can I sit with you?" I moved over on the bed, and she climbed in beside me like she used to, before the rules, before the silence. She handed me a new drawing. It was a dinner table. Me, sitting at the head, her next to me, Max beside her, and even Brian, smiling. There was a plate in front of me this time. "You're in it," she said, tapping the paper. "This is the real one." I didn't cry. I just pulled her close. The next morning, the social worker came. Her name was Caroline. She was calm, professional, and most importantly, she listened. To me, to Brian, to the children. She looked through my notebook, page by page. "This isn't just emotional neglect," she said. "This is patterned exclusion, systematic isolation." Brian's face was red. Shame, mostly, but he didn't run from it this time. Rachel stayed locked in the bedroom the entire visit, refusing to engage. Caroline noted it in her report. Every silence was now working against her. Not me. By the end of the week, changes were happening. Rachel moved out. She said it was temporary, said she needed space. But we all knew what it really meant. For the first time in years, the house breathed again. The curtains were drawn back, meals were cooked together. Emily and Max started asking questions about my childhood, my recipes, how to fold the laundry the way Grandma does it. And one night, as we set the table for dinner, Max looked up and said, "Can Grandma say grace tonight?" Brian glanced at me. I nodded. We all held hands. And I said, "Thank you for this table, for this home, and for every voice now heard around it." It wasn't elaborate, but it was enough. Because for the first time in far too long, I wasn't just sitting at the table, I belonged at it. It was a warm Friday afternoon when the letter arrived. An official-looking envelope addressed to me, not current resident, not left in a stack for someone else to toss, but Linda Marie Holloway, in neat black print. I opened it slowly. Inside, a finalized notice confirming joint residency rights to the property. Signed, sealed, my name restored. My hands trembled slightly as I held the document, not from age, but from the weight of what it meant. I walked out onto the porch and sat in my favorite chair, the one Rachel once said took up too much space. The kids were playing in the yard. Brian was trimming the hedges, his headphones in, humming to an old Springsteen track. Everything looked so ordinary, but I knew better. This was not ordinary. This was earned. I reached for my notebook, now nearly full, and turned to the last page. I wrote, "They told me I was lucky to be allowed in my own home, but I was never the guest here. I was the roots beneath the floorboards, the stories in the walls, the one who held this family when no one else remembered how. And now, they remember, not because I begged, because I stood, because I wrote, because I stayed." I paused, listening to Emily's laughter echo across the grass. Then I closed the notebook, gently, reverently, and placed it in the drawer of the entryway table, right where people would see it. A little while later, Max came running in with a popsicle melting down his arm. "Grandma," he yelled, barefoot and breathless, "we saved you a seat." I smiled, walked into the kitchen, took my place at the table, and before anyone else could say it, I did. I'm glad to be home. Not just in a house, but in a life that finally made room for me again. Because I was never really gone. I was always here. They just needed to remember. And now, they do.